In the early morning hours on September 4th, Russia fired ballistic missiles and drones at residential neighborhoods in Lviv, a city in the west of Ukraine. 8 civilians were killed, including a 7-year-old girl. Dozens were injured and hospitalized. Russian missiles and drones destroyed or damaged residential buildings, educational and medical institutions, and a church. Nearly 200 buildings in total.
Нашої квартири немає. Немає квартири.
Like all the key weapons produced by Russia to destroy Ukraine, Kinzhals, the ballistic missiles used in the attack, contain components crucial to their functions, components produced by American and European companies. Without Western microchips, Russia wouldn't have been able to produce them and launch these and many other deadly attacks on Ukraine. And yet, Russian arms manufacturers never stopped producing weapons with these components for the entire 3 years of the full-scale war against Ukraine. How do they get American microchips despite Western sanctions and export restrictions? To find out, I pretended to be an employee of a real Russian manufacturer, Almaz, which produces electronic systems for Russian military equipment. My fictitious name was Valentina Selichova. I introduced myself as the head of procurement at Almaz. First, I created an email account with a Russian email service and prepared a purchase request on behalf of Almaz. Next, I needed to make an order for 5,000 new microchips. Very specific microchips that could only be produced by American-based companies. I sent a request to Russian suppliers, which trade components produced by well-known American and European manufacturers. Finding them wasn't hard. These companies openly advertise their trade with the West on their flashy websites. Whenever an arms manufacturer needs electronics, it taps into this West network of Russian suppliers of imported electronic components. Just like I, or rather Valentina, did here. The network is a mix of state-owned and private companies that specialize in purchasing American and European chips. It was these trading companies that came to the aid of the Russian defense industry after the full-scale invasion, setting up workarounds to bypass sanctions and supply microchips to Russia. In other words, they built new supply chains for banned components. After waiting for about a week, some of these companies confirmed to me their ability to deliver the required American chips and send their price quotes. They said it would take them from 5 to 8 weeks to deliver the imported components to the Russian defense producer I pretended to represent. Some of them specified the manufacture dates of the chips that they could deliver to Almaz at my request. They included manufacture dates after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the implementation of export restrictions and sanctions. So, to be clear, these are not old pre-war stockpiles. These are newly manufactured components. One of the Russian suppliers sent a full list of the chips it had in its warehouse at the moment, indicating their quantity. There were millions of chips of famous American and European brands. Among them were those used in Russian missiles and attack drones. But aren't sanctions supposed to be blocking this? Before we go further into this story, I just want to remind you that the Kyiv Independent is a member-funded media outlet. So it's only with your support that we can continue to do investigations like this. Become our member following a link in the description below. Now back to the story. The US and EU imposed sanctions and export controls from the very first day of Russia's full-scale invasion. In terms of direct export, restrictions actually work well. Western chipmakers have stopped deliveries to Russia and banned official distributors from supplying the parts to Russian companies. So, how are these chips still getting to the Russian suppliers? When orders like that of Valentina are placed, Russian suppliers cannot turn directly to the United States or Europe due to restrictions. So instead, they turn to none other than China and Hong Kong. Chinese and Hong Kong companies buy microchips all over the world, mostly within Asia, where Western manufacturers have their factories. Look at this list. It is nearly endless, and it is just a glimpse of the full Chinese distribution network of Western components that could be available to Russian defense companies. These companies range from those with many years of experience to newly established entities without websites and public contact information. This is how American technology is getting into Russian weapons during war. By selling American chips from Hong Kong and China to Russia, these companies still violate US restrictions and risk being subject to US sanctions themselves. But as one can see from the customs records, dozens of Chinese and Hong Kong chip traders are willing to take the risk. And it is no secret to either the American authorities or microchip manufacturers that this is happening. As Valentina, I didn't have to meet smugglers in dark back alleys or foggy shipyards, nor buy boxes from some guy's trunk. This was all done through officially registered companies who publicly advertise their offering. Last year, manufacturers had to testify before the Senate subcommittee on how their chips ended up in Russia.
A Russian Kh-101 cruise missile hit Kyiv's largest children's hospital, slaughtering dozens of medical staff and children, brutally injuring many. That missile was made by Russia, but the technology in it was American. It could not function, nor could many of the weapons of slaughter manufactured by the Russians be made without microchips and technology from the four companies represented here today: Analog Devices, Intel, and Texas Instruments.
And without doing something to stop this flow of chips through China, we will continue finding Western microchips in Russian missiles attacking Ukraine. You might be thinking, even if American or European chips are somehow blocked from getting to Russia, can't they find alternatives? The emails of a Russian state-owned defense company previously leaked to the Kyiv Independent have shown that Russian defense manufacturers can't produce weapons without Western chips, nor can they be easily substituted with alternatives. For example, a sanctioned Rus electronics subsidiary argued that it needed to purchase certain chips produced by the American company Analog Devices. Why? Because Russian and other analogs do not comply with the design specification of the enterprise. The use of other chips is impossible, an internal note says.
If you're Intel, you're a manufacturer, right? You're not a distributor. And so a lot of those companies have large distributors. And if the distributors, that's their business, is they sell components, to all sorts of entities all over the world. A lot of the big manufacturers, lose visibility to where their components are after they go one step away from the distributor. I think it's a difficult problem to solve, but it doesn't mean it's impossible.
Dependence on foreign components is Russia's weakness. This brings hope that if the pressure on Western chip sales through China, Hong Kong, and other third countries is increased, Russia will not be able to produce missiles and other weapons. The Kyiv Independent contacted all the Western chip makers mentioned in this story. Companies, including Analog Devices, Texas Instruments, and Intel, responded, calling such resales of their chips to Russia illicit and unauthorized, and condemning them. They wrote they continued to look for ways to identify and prevent it. The problem is that Western chips could be resold many times before ending up in a Russian defense company, so that American and European manufacturers lose track of who their products is resold to.
For the Russians, this stuff is critical. It's absolutely critical. They can't build missiles without this stuff.
Every day, millions of dollars are made by manufacturers and distributors from chips like the ones that run the Kh-101 missile and other Russian weapons.
If you want to help us do more investigations like this, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent. Our work is funded by our readers. To learn more details about this investigation, please follow the link in the description. And if you want to suggest a topic for investigation, email me. Thank you for watching and for your support.